Dad, you're an embarrassment. Don't come to the rehearsal dinner. Actually, don't come to any of it. My daughter said it the way you'd cancel a dentist appointment. Flat. Final. Like I was something to be rescheduled out of existence. I stood in her kitchen, still holding the bag of groceries I'd brought over. $12 Montreal bagels from the Saint Viateur shop on Sherbrooke, the kind she'd loved since she was 9 years old. I set them down on the counter very carefully. Then I said, "All right, sweetheart, whatever you think is best." And I walked out. The drive back to Gatineau took 40 minutes. I didn't turn the radio on. For the record, my name is Gerald. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a licensed electrician in the Ottawa-Gatineau region, most of that time running my own small shop. I'm not a wealthy man by any measure anyone in my daughter's new social circle would recognize, but I own my house outright. I have no debt, and I've never once asked anyone for a handout. I raised my daughter, Simone, alone after her mother passed from ovarian cancer when Simone was 14. Just the two of us. For 9 years. She turned out beautifully. Or I thought she had. The whole thing had started 8 months earlier, the day Simone called to tell me she was marrying a man named Tristan. She'd been dating him for 11 months. I'd met him exactly twice. Once at a rushed coffee in Westboro, once at Christmas dinner where he spent most of the meal checking his phone and asking if the wine was the good bottle or just whatever was open. I had a feeling about Tristan from the beginning, the kind of feeling you get after 6 decades of reading people. He had the soft handshake of someone who'd never fixed anything with his hands. He worked in private wealth management, which I understood to mean he moved rich people's money around and took a percentage. His parents lived in Rosedale in Toronto and apparently owned a place in Mont-Tremblant as well. He had opinions about everything and experience with very little. But Simone was 31, and she was happy, and so I kept my feeling to myself. She asked me to help with the wedding, not the planning exactly, more the funding. The venue they'd chosen was a restored heritage estate in the Gatineau Hills, the kind of place where the lawn looked like it was ironed. The catering quote was from a French fusion restaurant that didn't post its prices online. The photographer had a website with no prices either, which is always a sign. I went through my RRSP. I called my financial advisor, a patient woman named who had managed my retirement savings for 11 years, and I told her I needed to liquidate a portion. She was quiet for a long moment, then asked if everything was okay. I told her my daughter was getting married. Another pause. She said she'd process the paperwork. $84,000. That's what I put into Simone's wedding over 8 months. The venue deposit alone was $22,000. I didn't flinch. She was my daughter, and I'd missed her mother's chance to see her grow up. If I could give Simone one perfect day, I wanted to give it to her completely. What I didn't understand at first was that the wedding had stopped being about Simone somewhere around month 3. It had become about Tristan's family, about what his mother, a thin, carefully assembled woman named who collected charitable board positions the way other people collect air miles, would think of the centerpiece arrangements. About whether the playlist would embarrass them, about whether the father of the bride, who showed up to venue walkthroughs in work jeans and a Carhartt jacket, would embarrass them. I started noticing it in small moments. Simone would be mid-sentence about something we'd discussed. The ceremony readings, the dessert table, the folk duo she wanted for cocktail hour, and then she'd catch herself and say, "Actually, Tristan thought maybe something more formal." Or she'd show me a photo of a floral arrangement and then say, "But his mom thinks the peonies are a bit country. What do you think?" And I'd say, I thought the peonies were beautiful because they reminded me of the ones her mother had grown in the backyard on Edgewater, and Simone would go very still and then change the subject. The conversation that broke things open happened on a Saturday in February. Simone and Tristan had come over to go through the catering menu. We were sitting at my kitchen table with printouts from the restaurant, and I mentioned that my old friend Ray ran a catering operation out of his restaurant in Aylmer, that Ray had offered to do the whole dinner for 60% of what the French fusion place was quoting, and that the food would be honest and good and made by someone who knew our family. Tristan looked up from his phone. He smiled. The smile never touched his eyes. Gerald, he said, I think we're past the church hall potluck phase of this wedding. I looked at him. I looked at my daughter. She didn't say a word. Ray's is in the church hall, I said, keeping my voice even. He runs a proper operation. His duck confit has been reviewed in the Citizen. Tristan shrugged. One shoulder, barely. I'm sure it's lovely for certain events. Simone jumped in, not to defend me, but to smooth it over. Dad, I think what Tristan means is we're trying to keep the tone consistent. It's not about Ray's. It's just a vision thing. Vision thing. I'd heard that phrase from her 3 times that month. It had Tristan's fingerprints all over it. I understand, I said, and I let it go. But it kept happening. 2 weeks later, Tristan made a comment about the music. I called in a favor with a Celtic folk duo I'd seen perform at the Knack years ago, 2 brothers from Arnproyer who were genuinely talented. They'd offered to play the cocktail hour for $500 because they knew my family and it was a good gig for them. When I mentioned it, Tristan said, we were thinking more of a string quartet. Something that reads a bit more, you know. He gestured vaguely with his hand. More. Just more. I knew what the gesture meant. A month after that, Simone called me to tell me they'd booked a different photographer, a Toronto-based one. Not Jake, who I'd lined up after helping him renovate his studio last spring. Jake had agreed to make the trip from Ottawa for cost, as a favor. Simone said Tristan's mother had a photographer she always used for family occasions, someone whose work was at the right level. I asked what level that was. Simone said, Dad, please don't make this difficult. That was the moment I should have seen it clearly. But I didn't. Or maybe I did and chose to look away, the way fathers do when they're not ready to accept what they're seeing. The Saturday of the rehearsal dinner conversation, Simone had invited me over to finalize the seating chart. I arrived with the bagels, and I found her and Tristan already deep in a conversation that stopped the moment I walked in. I felt the temperature in the room shift, the way it shifts when people have just finished saying something about you. We sat down with the seating chart printout spread across the table. I noticed immediately that my seat, the father of the bride's seat, had been moved. In the original plan, I was at the head table, beside Simone. Now there was a small sticky note with my name on it. Table 6. Near the back, I pointed at it. Is this a placeholder? Simone and Tristan exchanged a look. One of those looks that's a whole conversation compressed into a second. Dad, Simone said. Tristan's family has a lot of guests, and his parents and the family from Toronto. They should be at the front. It's just a logistics thing. I see, I said. You understand, right? Tristan said. His tone was the tone of a man explaining parking rates to someone who'd never driven. The table positioning reflects the hosting arrangement, since my family is effectively co-hosting. Your family didn't put in $84,000, I said. Quietly, not angry. Just a fact. The air went out of the room. Tristan leaned back. Actually, Gerald, that's exactly what Simone and I wanted to address. The way you reference your financial contribution, constantly like it's a scoreboard, it creates a really uncomfortable dynamic. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at the table. Simone, I said, is that how you see it? She looked up. What I saw in her face wasn't quite what I expected. It wasn't cruelty. It was something worse. It was the face of someone who had already made their decision and was bracing for the consequences of saying it out loud. Dad, she said, you make everything about what you've given. You show up with the bagels and the favors and the RRSP withdrawal, and it's this weight. It follows everything. We can't make a single decision without it coming back to what you paid for, or who you know, or some story about Mom's garden. Mom's garden. She said it like it was a manipulation tactic, like her mother was a weapon I was wielding. My hands were steady. I noticed that. Your mother grew peonies, I said, along the back fence on Edgewater. You helped her plant them the summer before you started high school. I mentioned them because the florist's arrangement reminded me of that. That's all it was. That's never all it is with you. I stood up. I picked up my jacket off the back of the chair. The bagels were still on the counter. You mentioned the rehearsal dinner, I said. I shouldn't come. Dad. And the wedding. She didn't argue. That was the thing I kept coming back to on the drive home. She didn't argue, Tristan said from his chair in that same measured tone. I think some distance right now might be good for everyone. I closed the front door very gently. At home, I made tea and sat at my kitchen table with the binder I'd kept since the beginning. Anyone who knows me would tell you about the binder. 3 decades as an electrician teaches you to document everything. Every quote, every contract, every phone call that matters. I had receipts, email confirmations, the written estimates from every vendor, and notes from every significant conversation. Dated. My daughter had teased me about it. Dad and his binder. He tracks everything like it's a job site. She wasn't wrong. It was a job site, and the job was her happiness. I opened the spreadsheet on my laptop. The numbers were familiar. I looked at them often enough. But now, I was reading them differently. Not as a father. As a contractor reviewing his scope of work. The venue, Domaine Bochen, Gatineau Hills. Deposit paid, $22,000. Balance owing in 6 weeks, $18,000. Billed to my visa. I picked up the phone. The coordinator who answered knew my name. I told her I needed to cancel the booking under Simone Bouchard raid. A long pause. She asked if everything was all right. I said there'd been a change of plans. She said the deposit was non-refundable per the contract, but the balance would not be charged. I thanked her and ended the call. $18,000. The Heritage Estate with the iron lawn, gone. Ray answered on the second ring. I'd called off the discount catering arrangement 3 months ago when Tristan had made his church hall comment, but Ray still knew the whole story. I told him I was canceling what remained of the vendor referrals I'd arranged. He was quiet. Then he said, in French, what I'll translate as, "She's a fool, and he's worse." I told him I appreciated that. The Ottawa folk duo, the brothers from Arnprior, were easy to reach. They were disappointed but gracious. I sent them $200 for the inconvenience anyway. I'd already lost the deposit on the rehearsal venue, a private dining room at a restaurant in Westboro. $1,500, non-refundable. I wrote that off and moved on. The wedding dress was the hard one. I'd gone with Simone to a boutique on Bank Street 6 months ago on a Tuesday afternoon, just the two of us. She tried on 4 dresses before she put on the 5th, and when she turned to look at herself in the mirror, her face changed in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. She looked like herself, but more so. I paid for it that afternoon, $4,100, altered and ready for pickup. I drove to the boutique the next morning. The owner, a kind woman who'd been in business there for 20 years, brought the dress out in its bag and set it gently on the counter. She could see from my face that something had gone wrong. She didn't ask. She just said the dress was paid for and it was mine to take. I brought it home and hung it in the spare room, still in its bag. The photographer from Toronto, Tristan's mother's choice, not mine, had been booked by Tristan directly. That one I didn't touch. It wasn't my contract. Jake, who I'd originally lined up, called me 2 days after to say he'd heard through a mutual friend that something had happened. I told him. He said some things about Tristan that weren't printable but were accurate. I told him to book another wedding for that weekend. He said he already had. By the end of the week, I had recovered $41,000 across the various deposits and balances. The remaining sum, the sunk costs in the non-refundable deposits, and the dress and the months of evenings I'd spent on the phone with vendors. Those were gone. I didn't need them back. They were the cost of loving someone unconditionally, and that cost is not something you invoice. Simone called Friday evening. I let it ring. The voicemail was short. Dad, the venue called. What did you do? Call me back. Just call me back. I didn't call back. Just call me back. The next message came 40 minutes later. Longer. More fractured. Tristan's parents are flying in from Toronto next week, and we have no venue and no catering, and Dad, you can't do this. This is insane. Please call me. I listened to that one twice, not out of cruelty. I was listening for something. I wasn't sure what. The third message came the next morning. It was calmer, scarier in its calm. Dad, I want to talk. Tristan and I are coming over Sunday. Please be home. They arrived at 11. I was in the garage when I heard the cars, Simone's Civic and behind it Tristan's Audi. I came out to meet them in the driveway. Simone looked like she hadn't slept. Tristan was wearing the expression I'd seen on him before, the one where he was preparing to be the reasonable adult in the room. We went inside. I made coffee. That seemed to throw them both slightly. They'd come braced for a fight, and they found me making coffee. We sat down. You've put us in an impossible position, Tristan opened. Do you understand that? The wedding is 7 weeks away. You can't just dismantle everything and act like it's a principled stand. It's sabotage. I canceled contracts I was party to, I said. I didn't sabotage anything. I withdrew my support. That's different. Over a seating chart, he said, over where your name appeared on a piece of paper. I looked at him. Over my daughter telling me I'm an embarrassment and shouldn't come to her wedding. He didn't blink. She was stressed. People say things. I know what stress sounds like, I said. That wasn't stress. That was a conclusion she'd reached, possibly with help. His jaw tightened. Simone said, Dad, I'm sorry. I mean that. What I said was wrong, and I'm sorry. She sounded like she did mean it. I believed she was sorry. I just wasn't sure what she was sorry about, the words themselves, or the consequences. I opened the binder on the table, not to read from it, just to let it sit there, visible. Simone, I said, when you told me the peonies were too country, was that your thought or his? A pause. When you moved me to table 6, who brought that up first? A longer pause. The folk duo. Whose idea was it to call them folk hall music? She looked away. That was its own answer. I don't think you're a bad person, I said. I think you've been inside something for almost a year and you can't see it from inside. But I've watched the whole thing from the outside, and I can tell you what it looks like. Tristan stood up. This is revisionist history. You've decided you're the victim here, and you're constructing a narrative. Sit down, I said. He sat down. I don't think he'd expected that. I said it the same way I talk to apprentices who are about to make an expensive mistake. Not loud. Just final. You've spent 11 months telling my daughter that everything I am and everything I come from is something to be managed. Not celebrated. Not respected. Managed. The food I suggested. The musicians I knew. The memory of her mother. All of it managed, minimized, or quietly removed, and she let you do it because she loves you and she wanted things to be smooth. I understand that. But I am not going to pretend I didn't see it clearly. Simone was crying. Not performance tears. Real ones. Dad, please, we can find another venue. We can fix the catering. It's not too late. I looked at her for a long time. This person I'd raised by myself in a house on Edgewater Drive in Gatineau, Quebec, through homework and heartbreak and the terrible 2 years after her mother died when neither of us knew how to be in the same room without crying. The wedding is off, Simone, I said. That's not changing. She left crying. Tristan left angry. They were, at least, leaving together, which maybe meant something. What I didn't know, sitting alone in my kitchen that Sunday afternoon, was that I wasn't done. I found out through the neighbors and the kind of quiet network that operates in a mid-sized city between people who've lived there long enough. Simone had found an alternative venue, the banquet room at a hotel near the Gatineau Casino. It held 200 people and smelled of commercial carpet cleaner and recycled convention circuit air. It was available on short notice because a retirement party had canceled. The catering was a buffet, not Ray's. A hotel buffet. The photographer was a second-year photography student that Tristan's cousin had found through Instagram. The dress fit badly. Simone had tried to rehem it herself, or had someone try, and the hem on the left side hung an inch lower than the right. I heard this from my neighbor Cecile, who'd heard it from someone on the guest list, who'd called her in the quiet way people do when they can tell a train is coming off the rails and they want someone else to know. The morning of the wedding, I put on the suit I'd bought to walk her down the aisle, dark charcoal, from a tailor in the Byward Market. I'd had it fitted in October. I drove to the hotel. I want to be honest about why I went. It wasn't to make a scene. It wasn't revenge in the way people mean when they say that word. I went because she was my daughter, and she was getting married. And somewhere beneath all of it, beneath Tristan and the seating chart and the word embarrassment, she was still the person I'd raised, and I needed to see that through to whatever this was going to be. I parked and walked in. The banquet room was easy to find. I could hear the string of anxiety and the ambient noise before I even opened the door. The room was set up with round tables and hotel-issued linens, white but the industrial kind that's been washed 500 times and lost its sheen. The flowers were grocery store arrangements, roses and baby's breath in plastic-wrapped bundles someone had cut and dropped into vases. A banner that said "Congratulations" in gold foil lettering was taped unevenly to the wall behind the small raised platform they were using as an altar. Tristan's parents were already there. His father, a silver-haired man in a suit that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to, was standing near the door with the expression of a man who had taken a wrong exit on the 417 and was recalculating. His mother was holding a glass of water and staring at the banner. I saw Simone near the side door, trying to hold her bouquet together. It was a supermarket bundle, tulips and filler, wrapped in a ribbon someone had tied in a hurry. Her dress listed slightly to the left. She was talking to her maid of honor, and her hands were shaking. She saw me the same moment I saw her. Her face collapsed, then rebuilt itself. Dad. Just that. I wouldn't miss it, I said. For one moment she looked like she was going to reach for me and I was going to let her, and maybe that would have been the end of it. Then Tristan appeared at her shoulder. Gerald. His voice was controlled. Formal. I'm glad you're here. I think this is a chance for everyone to move forward. I think this is a chance for everyone to see clearly, I said. He looked at me carefully. Let's not do this today. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just here. The ceremony started 20 minutes late because the officiant, a friend of a friend who'd gotten ordained online, couldn't find parking. When he arrived, everyone shuffled into position. I sat in the third row, not table 6. The third row. Nobody stopped me. When the officiant reached the part about who gives this woman, there was a pause. He looked around. I stood up. I do, I said. Her father gives her. There were people in that room who'd known Simone since she was small. People from the neighborhood, friends of ours from before her mother died. They were watching me with expressions that said they knew everything, that the network had briefed them thoroughly, and that they were waiting. I spoke for maybe 4 minutes. Not a speech. More like a small truth told out loud to people who deserved to hear it. I said that I'd spent 8 months and a significant portion of my retirement savings trying to give my daughter a perfect day, not because I wanted credit, but because I loved her, and because her mother wasn't there to help. I said that somewhere along the way the day had stopped being about what Simone and I had built together and had become about other people's comfort levels and social positioning. I said that the venue we were sitting in, and the flowers, and the banner on the wall were not the result of a budget problem. They were the result of choices. And choices have consequences. And I thought it was important to say that out loud, in the room where those consequences were on full display, so that when this day was remembered, it would be remembered honestly. I said that I loved my daughter, and that I hoped she would be happy. Then I sat down. The room was completely quiet for 4 or 5 seconds. Then Tristan's mother stood up and said something to his father, in a voice too low for me to hear, and they moved toward the exit. Tristan was looking at Simone. Simone was looking at me. The officiant, to his credit, finished the ceremony. They said the vows. They were pronounced married. There was applause, though it was the kind of applause that has questions in it. At the reception, I said goodbye to the neighbors who'd come. I shook hands with Simone's maid of honor, who squeezed my hand and didn't say anything, which was exactly the right response. I didn't touch the buffet. As I was leaving, Simone caught me near the door. Her eye makeup had run. Her dress still listed to the left. "I know you probably think this was justice," she said. Her voice was very quiet. "I don't know what it was," I said honestly. "I know it was true." She didn't say anything else. I walked to my car. The drive home was 40 minutes. I didn't turn the radio on. In the weeks that followed, I heard things through the network. Tristan's parents had flown back to Toronto the morning after the wedding. His mother had not called. His father had sent a card with a gift card to a home furnishing store inside. The honeymoon to Portugal had gone ahead, but something had shifted. Simone came home from it quiet in a way that her closest friends noticed. 4 months later, she called me from the driveway of the house they were renting in Barhaven. She said she'd left, that she'd been thinking about it since before the wedding, maybe since before that. That the conversation in the kitchen with the seating chart had been the first time she'd heard herself through someone else's ears, and not liked what she heard. We talked for a long time. Not about the wedding, about her mother, about Edgewater, about the peonies along the back fence. There are things I wish I'd done differently. I might have spoken up earlier, more directly, in those first months when I could feel Tristan's influence settling in like weather. I might have said what I saw plainly instead of setting it aside to keep the peace. Fathers learn too late, sometimes, that keeping the peace is not the same as keeping the family. But I learned something else. Sitting in that hotel banquet room under a crooked congratulations banner, watching my daughter hold together a supermarket bouquet in a dress that didn't fit. I learned that love is not the same as silence, that the most honest thing I could do for someone I raised was to let the truth be present in the room, even when the room wasn't ready for it. Simone is renting a small apartment in Hintonburg now. We have Sunday dinners sometimes. She brought peonies last June from a market on Wellington West. She put them in a jar on my kitchen table, and we both looked at them for a moment without saying anything. Some things don't need to be said.